$16,500. Fujifilm's first ever dedicated cinema camera is here, and I wanted to test it in real-life documentary situations like I normally do with other cameras. You know, fast cars, one-wing bend operation, anamorphic lenses, and a predictable British winter weather. So, does the Fujifilm color science and that massive sensor justify the price? Let's find out. Hi guys, I'm Johnny from CineD, and we have been following the development of the Fujifilm GFX ETERNA 55 since it was announced a bit over a year ago, and now I finally had a chance to work with the camera, but only for a day and a half, shooting with it at a UK racing track. And I want to be clear up front, this is a first look review based on a real world shooting, not a controlled lab test. We will do a full lab test analysis of the camera when it becomes available to us again. The scenario was good for testing. I followed Malcolm Williams, a Steadicam operator, industry consultant, stunt and actor, and Amber Jones, a Formula One presenter. They built their own drift kart and were kind enough to host me for 2 days next to arranging filming at the Drift Limits racing track. Let's watch the mini doc first and then come back to try and answer some valid questions.
It's like a feeling of being free, but also you're in control of so much power and danger.
My whole life is racing. It's motorsport, it's racing. I've been obsessed with racing since I was about 6-7 years old. The first experience was 2 friends at primary school. They had a birthday party together and it was go-karting. I'd never done it before and I said yeah, and it was just us three going out there in these small carts. They're called Bambino cadet carts. They're really small because they're for small children. I fell in love. I said to my dad, I want to do this for a living. My parents always supported my endeavours, what I wanted to do, what skills, what hobbies. I was a very active child and I wanted to be a racing driver. Although my parents couldn't support that because we don't have the money, my dad always said, go out there and race. He pushed me in the direction of, being a presenter. You can still talk about it and then eventually you will get to race some nice cars. So when I met Malcolm, he knew everything about vehicles. He knows so much more about the mechanics. I'll know more about the racing. He knows more about the mechanics. And then I said to him, you need to get out on a track.
My foundation kind of is driving. Mm-hmm. And one of my military roles, even in Afghanistan, was an advanced driver. And so I had a lot of driving experience, but nothing on a track. Mm-hmm. Obviously, a dabble here and there in go-karts, and as we do, but you never take it seriously. And then obviously being brought into your world and being pushed by you, I've got the experience and the knowledge and know how to feel cars and understand cars and how they work. But when it comes to the racecraft, it was a big eye-opener.
I honestly can't remember the conversation that we had to say, actually we're going to build our own race car. But we decided that we were going to build a drift car or a race car because we started looking into drifting, because drifting is a whole different driving principle. It's more accessible as well if you don't have thousands and thousands of pounds to spend on cars, seats, championships, all this stuff.
Also, what we both love doing is teaching and helping others. And one of the main things and the reason why we went down the route of the Mazda, because for what car you get, the power you get, the fun you get, how easy it is to work on, and it's a lot more accessible, the Mazda Cups and the certain races and that we enter into, it's easily accessible for other people. So the idea was to document the process of getting it from a road car to a track car safely, cheaply, but safely.
It's a male-dominated sport. There aren't very many females, and females that get to that top level of racing. Even the presenters, the engineers, the mechanics, again, mainly all males, always 1 or 2 females when there's like 15 men in a room. So that was another aspect of, we both bring different things to the table, and we're being advocates for people that want to learn how to get into racing, how to do it themselves, want to learn the mechanics, but also the female aspect of it. Can we get more females into this and show them it's not that daunting to work on a car? Because it feels scary as a woman, am I going to get this wrong? And the men are going to laugh at me. But the fact that we can then document it, show it, and be a couple together, the men and women can then unite and make this movement go forward, that females obviously belong in racing as well. We spend so much time together. That's the really nice thing. Because we travel a lot, we actually do work together quite a lot. Me as a presenter, Malcolm as a filmmaker, and obviously we do other things, you're actor, SPACT, all these different stuff.
I mean, the longest we probably spent away from each other was when I did that film in Austria. That was 30 days.
Yeah.
You know, that was rough.
Yeah, it was a long time, wasn't it? But I think just downtime for us is on the sofa, watching a film, watching TV.
Playing the PlayStation.
PlayStation, and then we've probably got 1 cat with us.
Yeah.
Not both at the same time.
Sometimes both.
Very rare.
Very rare.
So we have 2 cats. One, Dora, 9 years old, obviously your cat first. And then the second one, Beans, who is like nearly a year. Very different personalities. Beans is like a dog, so cuddly, so friendly. Dora's very much typical cat. Please leave me alone. So
Beans is like you.
Yes.
Dora's like
Dora's
me.
like you.
The engine, the longing, whoever's at the wheel keeps on turning, but you stood up, you lasted. You climbed out of the truck when you crashed it.
Advice that I would give to someone wanting to be in a similar environment or successful in the field that they want to go into, it would be focus on your own journey, because it's so easy to get caught up with what are they doing? Why aren't I doing that? Focus on your own journey, because it's going to look completely different to everyone else's.
Trust your gut more than anything else. You got your heart, your head, your gut. Your heart is superficial, because you wear it on your sleeve if you're like me. Your head is logical, not always the correct answer. But your gut is basically all the wrongs, all the mess ups, all the problems, everything you've had in the past sits in your gut. And if your gut's telling you something, what I've found most of the time is normally right. Trust your gut. Get yourself a good woman or partner.
Thank you, Amber and Malcolm. It was truly a pleasure spending some time together with you guys. Now, before I get into all the technical details, let me give you the bottom line first. The GFX ETERNA 55 does what it's designed to do very well. The image quality is very nice. Fujifilm's color science is great, and the 4x3 open gauge sensor is generally unique for the anamorphic workflows. But the question is whether those qualities justify the premium over alternatives. If you are prioritizing maximum specifications per dollar, the GFX ETERNA 55 occupies a difficult middle ground. Let's be honest about where this camera sits in the market. At $16,500, 3 things need to align: price, specifications, and target market. And I'm not so sure they do. Let me explain. For independent filmmakers like myself who are used to full-frame cameras with internal RAW next to having quality high frame rate at a much lower price, the GFX ETERNA 55 is a tough sell. The sensor size alone doesn't justify premium. Meanwhile, for professionals who might expect more for this price tier, there are specification gaps. So, who is this camera for? I could identify cinematographers who prioritize Fujifilm's color science above everything else. those who need the distinctive spatial rendering of the tall sensor for anamorphic work, or professionals who can accommodate the workflow limitations through external recorders and accessories. For rental houses, the calculation depends on realistic daily rates and how quickly awareness builds among production coordinators who make equipment decisions. Right now, it's competing against the established ARRI, RED, and Sony ecosystems. Us, owner-operators, face the most difficult decision. The $16,500 investment demands confidence that the camera's unique attributes transfer into a competitive advantage, whether through aesthetic differentiation, client preferences for the Fujifilm look, or specific project requirements that favor large format capture. Listening carefully to what the independent cinematography community has been saying, it seems as if the people were hoping for a smaller, more affordable version of that camera at a below $10,000 price point. Alternatively, enhanced video firmware for the existing GFX 102 hybrid camera would create a more accessible entry point into Fujifilm's large format ecosystem. And honestly, a lot of us were hoping for a Super 35 cinema camera based on the XH2S in a compact form factor, like what Canon, Sony and Nikon have been done with their EOS C50, FX3 and ZR. Fujifilm's color science in a such package with internal RAW at a more accessible price point, that's the camera many users actually are hoping for. The positive take, Fujifilm gained enormous experience building this camera. The menu system, the professional connectivity, the cinema-focused workflow features. This knowledge positions them in a great place. For now, the GFX ETERNA 55 camera is for a specific cinematographer who knows exactly why they want it. And if that's you, you'll probably love it. Alright, let's get into what this camera actually does. The heart of the GFX ETERNA 55 is a 102 megapixel sensor measuring 43.6 to 32.7 millimeters. Now, the camera can record up to 8K, but Fujifilm actually recommends shooting 4K open gate at 3840 by 2880 for the best image quality. And that native 4:3 aspect ratio, it's a dream for anamorphic work. For this project, I shot exclusively in 4:3 open gate, and the flexibility in post is fantastic. You can extract 16:9 for broadcast, 239:1 for cinema, vertical for social media, all from the same master recording without the penalties you'd get from cropping a smaller sensor. It also opened the door for experimenting with storytelling creativity, like filming in 4:3 aspect ratio and anamorphic within the same project, highlighting different stories within the main story itself. And if you are shooting anamorphic, Fujifilm has a great tool on their website showing exactly how different squeeze ratio will squeeze across various aspect ratio. I link to it in the description. Speaking of anamorphic, I paired the GFX ETERNA 55 with two SIRUI IronStar lenses, the 35mm and 60mm. These are 1.5 squeeze, T19 and incredibly affordable at $999 per lens. They are marked as full-frame lenses, but in reality, they cover the entire image cycle of the GFX ETERNA 55. Well, mostly. The 60mm and 45mm are completely safe to use, and the 35mm, you will see some vignetting, but there is a workaround. Instead of going for a 2:1 aspect ratio with full sensor desqueeze, choose 239:1. You sacrifice about 17% of the image, but this cuts more of the vignetting, and you get extra room for reframing and post. But in general, I recommend using 40mm anamorphic lenses and above. This helps avoid strong vignetting. Now, one issue I ran into with the current early firmware is that the camera can't output a desqueezed image to the 5-inch LCD or EVF. So I had to use our Kinefinity Eagle EVF over HDMI for properly desqueezed monitoring. The camera has a second anamorphic shooting option. It doesn't record with a full sensor, it crops in a bit, but this mode helped me to zoom in when I needed a tighter focal length. Just be aware that 25p isn't currently supported in this mode, which forced me to shoot the entire production in 24p to maintain consistency. Not ideal for a PAL broadcast country. Before this shoot, there was a lot of chatter about potential rolling shutter issues inherited from the GFX 102 hybrid camera. So I deliberately pushed the camera. Aggressive pans, fast-moving objects, exactly the conditions where rolling shutter would show up. The verdict, I didn't see any concerning artifacts. Fujifilm has tuned their readout speeds, positioning the camera competitively against dedicated cinema bodies rather than photo-hybrid sensors that often exhibit more pronounced rolling shutter. We will have precise measurements in our upcoming lab test, but my real-world experience says this camera handles motion just fine for documentary and narrative work. The GFX ETERNA 55 has dual native ISO at 800 and 3200 and an integrated variable electronic ND filter ranging from ND 0.6 to ND 2.1. That's 2 to 7 stops in almost seamless increments. What I really appreciate is the dual control. You can adjust ND from the front multifunction dial or the one on the top handle. Build quality is excellent with extensive rigging options. In fact, you don't need an external cage for basic accessory attachment. The standout design feature is the dual 3-inch LCD screens, one on each side of the camera. Both display identical information: recording status, exposure, audio levels, format settings. Your assistant can monitor from one side while you operate the camera on the other. Plus 6 buttons from either side for quick access to your most used settings without diving into menus. This big 6-button layout, and sorry Sony, I had to use this term, really accelerates on-set adjustments. The included 5-inch LCD screen articulates on the flexible arm and handles touch navigation well. Fujifilm is also developing a dedicated EVF. We have already seen the prototype floating around. Autofocus is another advantage of this camera. When paired with compatible Fujifilm GF lenses, you get hybrid autofocus with subject tracking. I couldn't check the autofocus performance of this camera because I was using manual SIRUI Anamorphics, but if you want autofocus, take a close look at the Fujinon GF 32 to 90mm T3.5 lens. At $6,000, you get a power zoom, autofocus and built-in optical stabilization. I think it's currently the best run-and-gun GF lens available. One thing to note, unlike the GFX 102, the GFX ETERNA 55 body doesn't have internal sensor stabilization. But when you use compatible lenses with the built-in stabilization, the lens communicates with the body to optimize for specific focal length and conditions. Let's talk about powering the camera. Power is thoughtfully implemented. D-mount battery plate on the back, with adapters available for gold mount. But here's the clever bit. There's an internal NP-W235 battery slot that provides power during V-mount battery changes. The camera enters a low power state and recording stops, while it's a wait for the external power source to be replaced. So the NP-W235 acts as a battery backup in the sense that the camera doesn't fully shut down. Power consumption in general is surprisingly efficient. I finished a very long shooting day with just 2 K&F Concept 99 Wh batteries. A quick sidebar on the SIRUI IronStar anamorphic lenses before continuing talking about the camera. All in all, they perform great. The anamorphic characteristics are subtle, not bombastic. I was using the natural flare option, so no wild streaks everywhere. Limitations? The 35mm has noticeable anamorphic pincushion distortion, and the minimum focus distance is not great either. As a side note, SIRUI is completing the IronStar set with 3 additional focal lengths: 75mm, 100mm and 135mm. And for the latest batch of those lenses, SIRUI has updated the lens mount for better compatibility with various adapters. Alright. At $16,500, this camera has some noticeable limitations. The GFX ETERNA 55 does not have internal RAW recording. In fact, none of Fujifilm's cameras do. Now, for professional productions with dedicated color and editorial teams, compressed files are often fine, but I am an advocate of internal RAW, especially for independent filmmakers working without extensive crew support. RAW is safety net. When you are shooting solo in challenging conditions, rapid changing light, no time to dial perfect settings, the ability to adjust white balance and exposure in post is like an insurance. You can get RAW through SDI or HDMI external recording to Atomos or Blackmagic devices. The GFX ETERNA 55 tops out at 120 frames per second, but only in Full HD. At this price, I was hoping for 4K at 120 frames per second. You can do 60 frames per second in 4K open gate, which is respectable, but for truly cinematic slow motion, you are choosing between resolution and frame rate. I went with resolution. Now, I understand reading out the massive sensor at a high speed is technically challenging, but competitors in this price bracket offer 4K high frame rate, so this is not an absolute limitation, but a disadvantage. Fujifilm's film simulations are legendary, and the GFX ETERNA 55 includes 20 built-in looks. But here is where I get a bit uncomfortable. Navigating film simulation involves 3 separate menu locations. One to enable or disable flat picture profile recording. Another to determine whether the simulation burns into your footage or stays isolated to monitoring. And a third to select the actual simulation. That fragmented structure led me genuinely worried about accidentally baking a look into my footage instead of keeping it on the monitoring only. Once I figured it out, it was reliable, but the initial setup requires careful verification. Okay, let's talk audio. There are no built-in XLR inputs, just 2 3.5mm jacks for mic input and headphones monitoring. Fujifilm supports the Tascam adapter kit, which mounts to the hot show and gives you proper XLR inputs, but that's additional cost and complexity. And there's a practical issue. The top handle has a hot show at the front for accessories, but the 3.5mm input is at the rear. The cable that comes with most wireless audio systems aren't long enough to reach comfortably. You will need longer cables or different mounting solutions. And here is something nobody talks about in reviews. When you're moving a $16,500 camera across borders, you might need a carnet. It's basically a passport for professional gear that prevents customs from charging duty fees. I actually asked Fujifilm to deliver the camera within the UK rather than risk customs issues. Smaller, less expensive cameras often avoid this bureaucratic headache entirely. Worth considering if you are working internationally. So that's the GFX ETERNA 55, a camera that does what it's designed to do very well, but asks you to pay a premium for it and work around some limitations. Thank you to Amber Jones and Malcolm Williams for their hospitality, to Drift Limits UK and Peasants Revolt Micropub. Thank you guys for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.